When I was first in my career of corporate America in my early 20s, I was in sales, believe it or not, and I sold this thing called long distance. We used to call them Watts lines. So you might remember that if you have any business history. And we had an opportunity. I was working in Kansas City, and we were going to be offering service in Wichita, Kansas, and I was like, I want to go to the new territory. And I was one of the few salespeople that got to go in when we first could offer service, Watts line service, to Wichita, Kansas. And when I drove into Wichita, Kansas, I went, something's different about this city. Jesse says, yep, it is, and he's not even been to Wichita. If you've been to Wichita, you'll know that there's something different about the city. And I spent like 3 or 4 days going, what is different about this place? There's something different. What is different? And about the 4th day, all of a sudden, I was downtown Wichita, and this whoosh of wind came by, and I went, there's no litter here. I had been in a city for 4 days, and I had not seen a piece of litter in Wichita. And I went, oh, that's what's different about this city. They don't have litter here. They don't have trash on the grounds. Wow, isn't that nice? It's so pretty. Now, I don't know if they didn't have litter because everybody was really conscious about not throwing trash on the ground and very conscious about making sure their dumpsters were sealed when they put the trash in, or if it was just windy and it blew it away. But I did know there was something different about that city. And this psalm is about the idea of Zion, Jerusalem, the holy city. Now, in August, we're going to do a whole summer series on Psalms. So if you like the Psalms, you want to be here every Sunday because we're going to be preaching on a different Psalm each Sunday in August. And this is just your little appetizer for the day, okay? There are different kinds of psalms. There are psalms of lamentation. There are psalms that are considered royal psalms. There are psalms of even words I can't even say. And so today's psalm we're going to talk about is known as a Psalm of Zion. And there are several Zion psalms. 46 is one. 48, which you've just heard, is one. 76, 84, 87, and 122 are all Zion psalms. Now you're going, okay, what does that mean to me? Well, Zion is typically known as the city of God. And if you Google Zion, the definition for Zion is either pure in heart, a city or a hill where the holy dwell and God is on the throne. It's a holdout place in the movie Matrix, if any of you've seen that movie. It's also a place of spiritual enlightenment, a place where you can be the happiest person alive. From a Hebrew understanding, it is a refuge or a sanctuary. And Rabbi Stephen Nathan says that Jerusalem, from a biblical text, a Hebrew text, was known as Ir Shalem, which means city of wholeness, or Ir Shalom, which is city of peace. Jerusalem, Zion, the city of wholeness, the city of peace. Now, the important thing about it is we tend to get really fixed on concrete things like bricks and buildings and location. And it's not intended that the physical city is necessarily the major holy place, although I have understood from people who've gone there that they have really holy encounters when they get to walk in Israel and in Jerusalem. However, Rabbi Stephen Nathan brings out this concept that in the Kabbalah tradition of Judaism, which is more of a mystical understanding, it understands Zion as being a place where the Shekinah glory of God is, where God's holy presence is. And therefore, it's not limited to how many miles? a 48 square mile radius, and it is limited to 706,800 people. In essence, Zion, Jerusalem, the city of wholeness, could be here. Could be in our city, could be in our office, could be in our work, could be in our home. Anywhere where we are intentional to encounter the presence of God. Anywhere we are intentional to connect and live in the presence of God. Now, in this text, we have the people who are coming and talking about Jerusalem, and they are celebrating it because God is there. God is present. And there's a whole understanding, a whole group of people that are called Zionists. And that happened because there was a time in which the people of Israel was dispersed across the world. You see, in the text of the psalm, it talks about the city being invincible, but we know that the city wasn't invincible. It was completely destroyed in 587 before the Common Era, and then the temple was again destroyed in 70 of the Common Era. It wasn't about a physical strength, a building being able to withstand earthquakes and storms and wars. It was about a spiritual understanding of living out the presence of God, the power of God in your community and in your life. It talks about Zion in Isaiah 2, verses 2 through 4, and in the book of Micah, in which all of the nations will come to Zion for justice. Justice. And Zion is about the witness of God's presence and the character of God. Within this psalm, you will hear phrases about God being great, about God protecting when the people were at war, when the armies were coming to surround them and attack them, that God's protection, God's presence caused their enemies to be in shock and to run. That the enemies were so afraid of being in God's presence that they were worse in fear, and their body was acting differently than a woman in labor. And for those of us who've experienced it, you can get an idea of what they were going through. It wasn't pretty. The power of God's presence overwhelmed their energy, and God protected them. In the text, it talks about God's steadfast love. And the word that is used is hesed. And hesed means that God loves when there's every reason not to love. The power of that is amazing. It means that if I were to say, God, I'm going to make you not love me, it's not possible because of who God is. The very being of God is that of loving even when you've given God every reason not to love. Righteousness, where God sets things aright, where there is order, where the needs of all are met, where the widow and the orphan are embraced in society, their needs are met. God's order is set aright, and justice and peace prevails. And so when the psalmist talks about, let's walk about Zion, it wasn't a walking tour of the architecture of the city, which I am sure would be an amazing thing to do. To walk and see where this is and that is, to see the dome, to see the garden, to see it all. But more, it's a walking tour about your own spiritual encounter with God. In Australia, you might have heard the term when you watched Crocodile Dundee many years ago about a walkabout. Well, that was actually a rite of passage within the Aborigines group of people. When you got to a certain age, you would do a walkabout into the wilderness, and you would learn how to survive And it was part of your spiritual development to become a full human being, spiritually mature. And so when we talk about walking about Zion, there's two ways that I would like you to think about. First of all, let's just dream for a moment. Imagine God's presence so thick in our city that we could walk about, and we could take you to the neighborhoods in the North City and to the neighborhoods around us that the houses have been vacant, that the houses are falling down, and that we could bring a visitor or a tourist and say, look how great God is. God has restored the ruins, just like it talks about in Isaiah. And that we take you to the places that are hospitals, and we show that people are able to have the health care that they need. And let's walk about and see city streets where there is no one lugging all their belongings around them because they're living in houses that we have built. Let's talk about showing people our business district where people are doing productive, fulfilling work and earning a fair living. Let's talk about how we are able to forgive one another, how we're able to break down all the barriers between us that separate us from being true human beings and family with one another. How we are able to embrace across racial and ethnic and cultural and every other divide that the world tries to bring, because God's set it aright in our lives. Imagine when people come to visit you in this city, that when they arrive at the door of your house, they say, what's different about this place? You don't have trash. You don't have homeless people. What is it that's different? And that the answer is that God's presence is so thick in this place that you know it. Maybe you can't name it or articulate it, but you know there's something different about this city. The risk within our world, the risk with Zionism, is that you can get it all nationalistic, that you can get it stuck in bricks and mortar and not really get it in the living it out. And so this week, I want to invite you to take some serious time to think about you being the building, a citadel, a fortress, a building that carries the holy Shekinah glory of God within you. And I want you to think about, on a personal level, if you were to give someone a walkabout with your spiritual journey, what story would you share about how God had been so great in your life? How God did something miraculous in your life? What story would you share